Hey everybody, what's happening? Matt Ham here. This is a continuation of our series on teamwork. We are almost halfway through here, guys. This has been fun. It's been a bit different than our normal calls, but we've been walking through John Maxwell's 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. This was written. I was actually trying to find out the other day when this was written. Let's see here. Yeah, it was written in 2001. So you're talking about something that's 20 years old. Some of the points and principles in it, apply to a different time when kind of companies, corporations function in a different way. But the laws and the principles are timeless. And so that's what we're tapping into. And we're also kind of adapting it to what we do, which is luxury or amenitized community sales when it regards to real estate. So we know you're in an individual environment, but you're also part of a team at your community, and you're also part of the Red Earth team. So we're trying to build this corporate structure, this corporate culture, this mindset. We want you to have your own culture at your communities. Even if you're a one-person show, you still carry a culture with you by how you talk about the community, how you present yourself, how you carry yourself, and all the above. So you have to think of it like this idea of building something that is a team that goes just beyond you and what's good for you today and your goals, etc. That being said, this is Law 8, and it is the law of the bad apple. The law of the bad apple. You can probably guess where we're going with this one, but we start off these kinds of talks and say, I know that everybody who's on the call today and everybody who is watching the video replay is not a bad apple. Because if you were a bad apple, you probably wouldn't be jumping on this call, right? But I guarantee you that every single person on the call or everybody watching the replay knows a bad apple. And if you're in the group setting and you're at your office, you could probably point out who those bad apples are, which is funny because that's exactly how we navigate this concept. Is we're never the bad apple, but we know who is. And so in challenging us to really press into this law is all about attitude, our attitude. So the bad apple is not about a bad person, it's about a bad attitude. And the way that Maxwell puts this is that rotten attitudes ruin a team. I remember back when I was selling insurance with Farm Bureau Insurance, we had a really dynamic environment. There were about 800 agents across the state, and we were all in kind of one-to-one competition with one another. But then we were also divided into 10 districts, and those districts were always in competition. And then we were divided into about 150 offices, and those offices were in competition with one another. So we had a variety of layers to our competitive spirit. And the office that I was in was always trying or vying to be the top office in the state. We were always vying to be the top district and always vying to be the top agent. And I'll say this, I was there for 10 years, and not all of those years were good years. In fact, the majority of the years in the office, it was a very bad environment. There was bad attitudes. There was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of negativity. And it was really, really tough to be in that environment because you knew that there was division. These people didn't get along and all that kind of stuff. And so that kind of vibe and that energy ended up affecting me to the point where 10 years into the business, I was ready to get out. I was ready to go do my own thing. And you saw a lot of turnover in that environment because this is kind of the way it was. Bad apples, bad management, bad attitudes, and they cycle through folks. And so I'm not saying that's the case with you guys. I'm saying I've experienced that. But the one year that we probably had our best year ever, I had an idea that as an office, we needed to go run a half marathon. Now, let me be very clear. The people in the office were not capable or half marathon runners. We had a couple of dudes who were, probably mid 40s, and they were probably 40, 50 pounds overweight. But we used this as a moment to come together as a team to accomplish a common goal. And I was actually racing triathlons at the time, and so I invited the guys to join me in this. And we had a little side kind of competitive thing in the office where there were 6 of us, so 3 of us were going to compete against the other 3, and we were going to total up our times and see who won, and the one group was going to take the other to dinner. And that ended up being the most successful year that we ever had because we had something that as a team we could come together on, and everybody's attitude toward it was great because we were all looking forward to running the race. Our families were cheering us on. Different guys had different goals, and every single one of the six of those guys finished that half marathon, and it was a really great environment, and it trickled down into our production. And so that year our office was actually the number one office in our division, and it was really neat to see. But the next year happened and we didn't have the same vibe. Guys started backbiting against one another and things kind of started to spiral. And so that was a really keen moment in my experience where I saw that attitudes matter. One of the things that Maxwell says about this is that a good attitude does not necessarily guarantee success, but a bad attitude absolutely guarantees failure. A good attitude does not necessarily guarantee success, but a bad attitude absolutely guarantees failure. And he talks about the difference between talent and attitude. And he said, you've got to have talent in order to win, but you can also have talent and lose. And what makes a losing culture and a losing environment can be bad talent, but it can also be a bad attitude. So those of us who are in a management position, or if we're managing ourselves, I think we have to look at this dualistic nature of who we are as salespeople. We have to look at our talent, which is our skill set, and we have to look at our attitude. And we have to go against both and say, do I need an attitude adjustment here, or do I need a skill set adjustment here, or do I need both? So we have to be constantly focusing on this dualistic nature of how we engage our business and how we approach our clients. We need to work on our skills, but we absolutely have to work on our attitudes. Same goes true for the team concept. So you look at this individually, you look at this as a team, and we have to look at this as a kind of a corporate organization as well. So a couple things that Maxwell says here. He says, take an attitude and break it down into four characteristics. There's a rotten attitude, which is a really sour attitude. Then there's just a bad attitude, kind of a cynical, critical spirit, but it's not like intentionally divisive. It's just kind of like an Eeyore. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, if you remember Eeyore, right? Eeyore is just kind of, okay, Pooh, just that's kind of the bad attitude. Then there's an average attitude. It's just somebody who's there, they do their job, and they don't complain, but they're also, too, not beating down the door to be the one who's kind of bearing the joy and the light and the life of the office. And then you have a great attitude, which is somebody who is fully engaged. They're enthusiastic. They bring everybody around them up. They rarely weigh anybody down. They're always seeing the positive side of things. They're energized. They're focused. They know who they are. They're moving forward. So he says, think of it this way. We always have to have great talent and get better at our talent. So talent is being kind of, we're locking it into place. We're not even considering that we're having bad talent. We're talking about you take good talent. He says if you take great talent and you add a rotten attitude, then you have a bad team. If you have great talent plus a bad attitude, you've got an average team. If you have great talent and average attitudes, you have a good team. And if you have great talent, great attitudes, that equals a great team. So basically what he's saying is the attitude multiplies your talent. And I really like that. I really like that a lot. Attitude multiplies talent. He didn't actually say that, but that's what I see when I read this. There you go. So attitude multiplies talent. And I think what he's getting at here is if you have a really bad attitude, it's a low multiplier. So great talent is a 10, okay? And you've got a rotten attitude, which is a 1, you've actually got a 10. But if you've got a great talent and a great attitude, that's a 10 by 10, that's 100. So it's exponentially different when you take a great attitude into an environment versus a rotten attitude. So attitude multiplies talent. I like that. He says one of the ways that you tap into attitudes is you put people in the presence of others. So great, right? If you really want to see how messed up you are, try to do life with other people, right? It's like everything's good until we had to have Thanksgiving together. You know, it's that idea. It's like life gets hard when you have to do it with people. You know, if we were on an island and we could do what we wanted all the time, it's kind of like my son. My son's 10 years old right now, and he gets fiery from time to time. And he's like, I can't wait till I'm 18. And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. But, you know, I'm like, he thinks that he'd be better off if he was on his own. He thinks he'd be better off as he on his own. But what he doesn't realize is, listen, it's just hard to do life with people and parents and all that kind of stuff. And if you're on your own, it might seem like you have a lot of freedom from time to time. But it's when you are isolated and alone when you absolutely get consumed. It's not a coincidence that if a wolf or wolves are looking to kill a sheep, they separate the sheep from the flock and they circle it up and they kill it. Isolation is the quickest way for you to get consumed and get eaten up. And so people like to isolate when they, have bad attitudes, when if they're in the presence of bad attitudes. So you've got to learn to work as a team. You've got to learn how to kind of play together, if you will. The kicker there is your attitude and their attitude is going to be magnified when it's in the presence of others, which is why it is so challenging, which is why we have these conversations. Um, the other thing he points out, which is very important, is that bad attitudes grow faster than great attitudes, right? Bad attitudes are contagious, terribly contagious. And I'm going to be honest, right now in our world, there is a critical and cynical spirit that is loose in the atmosphere, and it wants to cause everything else to be critical and cynical. Oh my gosh, have you heard this? Oh my gosh, let's focus on this. In fact, right now, like I'm sitting in Wilmington, North Carolina, our governor yesterday put out a notice that there was going to be a gas shortage. Now, we don't actually know that there's a gas shortage. We're relying on our governor telling us that there could be a gas shortage. Everybody goes out last night and this morning and fills up with gas. Right now, gas stations in our city are without gas completely, and you've got lines that are literally like half a mile long, people waiting to get gas. And that is all because, somebody said something and everybody's focusing on it. And it's that kind of like fearful spirit of, oh my gosh, what if, what if, what if, what if? And people are panicking. It's the same thing back, 12, 14 months ago with toilet paper. I hear there's a toilet paper shortage. I'm going to go and hoard toilet paper. Well, of course, when people start hoarding toilet paper, you have a toilet paper shortage. So I'm not saying that there wasn't a shortage of production of toilet paper, or maybe there is some gas issues right now, but when that critical, cynical, fearful spirit, which is present in the atmosphere right now, when it compounds, it's just like a bad attitude on a team, and all of a sudden it goes boom and it rots fast. My wife bought a batch of strawberries the other day, right? And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when a fruit begins to rot, it rots very quickly. Like they're fine for a week or so. But then all of a sudden, once one moldy spot or one bad spot happens, not only does it rot that piece of fruit, but it's contagious and it begins to rot the other pieces of fruit that are next to it. Have you ever seen that before? If you have a bad strawberry in the right-hand side of the basket, the fruit around that strawberry is what begins to rot first. Because bad attitudes are contagious. Rotten fruit is contagious. And it spreads very quickly. And so know that a bad attitude spoils faster than a good attitude. And that's just kind of nature, right? So you've got to be mindful of that and constantly fight against it. So the last thing we'll say about this is what makes a bad attitude on a team is really only driven by one thing, and that is selfishness. It's just selfishness. A bad attitude is ultimately, I matter more than the team. What matters to me matters more than what matters to the team. It's my way or the highway. That kind of mindset, that kind of combative, selfish mentality is what will unravel a team completely. And so kind of what do we do about this? Well, I think knowledge is the first step. We have to realize that bad attitudes are contagious. Bad attitudes are a great way to unravel a team. And so we have to do a self-reflection test. We have to say, you know what? Is this a talent problem or is this an attitude problem? And if it's an attitude problem, we have to be willing to change. And we also have to be willing to submit ourselves to those around us. I have a group of men that meets every Monday night. It's kind of a Bible study group of guys, and it's a rowdy bunch of guys. We're a little bit um, we're kind of like a band of thieves, if you will, coming from all different backgrounds. But one of the things these guys do really well is they submit themselves to one another. We submit ourselves to one another. So if a guy's got a bad attitude, everybody's going to come around him and say, "Hey, man, that's really not flying tonight. I know you're hurting. I know you got some things going on. I know you're strongly opinionated about this, but you're really bringing everybody else down." That happens from very, very often. And so you've got to be willing to submit yourself to somebody else to let you know that your attitude's bad, because you might not know it's bad, but somebody else perceives it as bad. That's something that needs to be addressed. And so I think first step is recognizing bad attitudes are contagious. Second step is recognizing if we are the source of the problem. And if everybody did their part to make sure that they weren't being the source of the problem, figure out what they can do to bring the best of themselves to the table and work together for the team, that's how you begin to eradicate. You got to get the bad fruit out in order for the rest of the fruit to be healthy. So think about that law of the bad apple. Maybe process it with your manager at your community. Process it amongst yourselves as you think about your own skill sets and your own mindsets that you bring to the table. And if there's something that's rotten there and you need to get rid of it, let's talk about it. Would love to help with that. That's part of the work that we do. So again, Matt Ham here, Law 8, the law of the bad apple. Thank you guys for joining. We'll see you guys next week.